In his fictional book, Telling Jehovah, secularist author James Morrow tries to imagine a post-theistic world, one where God is dead and humanity plows on without his existence. Morrow has one of his characters utter a line that seems very appropriate for today's conversation. That maxim, "There are no atheists in foxholes," the character says, is not an argument against atheism, but an argument against foxholes. When discussing the intersection of military service and religious conviction, I speak on a topic that literally hits close to home. In addition to being an Army officer, an Iraq combat vet, and, I confess, a person of faith, I'm also the daughter of a U.S. Navy chaplain. Some of my earliest memories involve observing the complex intersection of patriotism and religious belief, or lack thereof. The question we consider today, then, is whether you, as Constitution-loving atheists, agnostics, humanists, and freethinkers, in good conscience can accept the place of chaplaincy in the U.S. Armed Forces. Can an atheist or an agnostic not only tolerate, but actually endorse a Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, or Muslim chaplain in uniform? My aim today is to explore with you why the chaplaincy is indispensable to the morale and readiness of the U.S. Armed Forces. And as such, it is essential to a prosperous United States. The chaplaincy is essential to a strong armed forces, first, because spiritual practice is the center of morale for many, if not most, of U.S. service members. Second, the chaplaincy is consistent with the separation of church and state. It actually upholds that fundamental constitutional principle. And third, chaplains perform a variety of missions outside of religious practice. First, let's address the obvious: the U.S. military. Like the nation it serves, is populated predominantly by persons of faith. According to a 2009 Department of Defense study, only 1 in 4 identified as having no religious preference. It is reasonable, then, to conclude that spiritual practice is critical to the morale and welfare of the majority of U.S. Armed Forces service members. The military often places necessary hardships on its members: deployments, remote assignments, separation from families. For a person of faith, it is natural and their right to turn to one's religious beliefs when you're going through a struggle. By removing the chaplaincy, we would eliminate what in many cases is the sole source of spiritual encouragement for these service members. Our nation's Second Circuit Court of Appeals confirmed this rationale in 1985 when 2 Harvard law students attempted to challenge the constitutionality of chaplains in the U.S. Armed Forces. The court ruled that the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment, and I quote, obligates Congress, upon creating an army, to make religion available to soldiers who have been moved to areas of the world where religion of their own denominations are not practiced. The chaplain, you see, is more than a religious leader, but a protector of morale and a sacred partner in the military fight. The Armed Forces chaplaincy is also a protector of something that I know myself and you all value very highly: the Constitution. In eliminating Armed Forces chaplaincy, we would in reality be violating the Establishment Clause, that famous portion of the First Amendment that prohibits state from imposing ideology and religious conviction on its citizens. By eliminating from the armed forces the opportunity for meaningful religious practice, a right that only a robust chaplaincy ensures, we would be, in effect, imposing a secularist worldview on military persons of faith. This was the position of Associate Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart, who in 1963 argued that, and again I quote, "A lonely soldier stationed at some faraway outpost could surely complain that a government which did not provide him the opportunity for pastoral guidance was affirmatively prohibiting his free exercise of religion." Friends, that is not freedom. That is oppression. And we do well to remember that one not need believe in God to play the unconstitutional tyrant with their religious views. The chaplaincy, in practice, is more than a religious office. It is the anchor of well-being in the soul of a unit. Chaplains perform a number of essential services that extend well beyond religious observation and encouragement. Many troops, for instance, would turn to a chaplain instead of a behavioral health officer for fear of the stigma associated with seeing the behavioral health officer. In the age of soaring PTSD cases, suicides, and addictions, we cannot afford to eliminate such a core counseling resource for our troubled service members. The Armed Forces chaplaincy, at its core, isn't about religion at all. It's about taking care of the service member. It is indispensable to the morale and readiness of our men and women in uniform, because spiritual practice is central to the majority of U.S. service members. Chaplaincy upholds the separation of church and state, and chaplains perform a number of essential services that extend well beyond religious practice and care. As those of you who value freedom of thought and expression, I urge you to consider the role of the chaplain as an office that upholds the freedoms across our military ranks. Only if you can support the constitutional rights of others can you expect others to respect the constitutional rights of you. So while it is true that there are indeed atheists in foxholes, there are also Muslims, Protestants, Jews, and Catholics. And only in recognizing and encouraging that diversity of religious expression can we empower our service members to carry out their sacred duty to state and nation. That concludes my speech. Thank you.